The film opens on a messy city street where a man lies passed out on the pavement, clearly drunk. A young boy nearby approaches him cautiously and asks if he can see the news playing on a nearby television. The man, Hancock, glances at the screen and notices a report about a group of criminals fleeing in a stolen car. Realizing what's happening, Hancock tells the boy to leave the area immediately. The child calls out to him once more before running off. It soon becomes clear that Hancock is no ordinary man. He possesses incredible abilities. He can fly, withstand almost any injury, and lift enormous weight with ease. However, despite these powers, he has developed a terrible reputation throughout Los Angeles. His reckless behavior and constant drunkenness make him more of a nuisance than a hero in the public's eyes. Whenever he intervenes to stop crime, the aftermath usually involves massive property damage. People across the city openly mock him, frequently calling him an idiot, a word that instantly ignites his temper. Hearing the insults once again, Hancock grabs a bottle of alcohol and storms off. Moments later, he soars into the sky. In mere seconds, he catches up with the fleeing criminals. Demonstrating his immense strength, he lifts their entire car into the air and slams it onto the top of a tall tower, leaving the criminals helpless and easily captured by authorities. The criminals are stopped, but the destruction caused during the process only adds to the city's frustration with him. Bystanders shout questions and insults in his direction, and Hancock responds with the same rude, careless attitude, reinforcing the public's hatred toward him. The story then shifts to a completely different scene, a crowded roadway stalled in heavy traffic near a railroad crossing. Among the frustrated drivers is a man named Ray. As the cars remain stuck, Ray suddenly realizes something horrifying. His car is sitting directly on the railway tracks. With vehicles packed tightly all around him, he has no space to move forward or reverse. Panic sets in as he tries desperately to free the car. In the distance, the sound of an approaching train grows louder. Ray decides to abandon the vehicle and escape, but when he tries to open the door, the lock jams. Trapped inside, he stares helplessly toward the rapidly approaching train, convinced his life is about to end. Just when the situation seems hopeless, Hancock suddenly appears out of nowhere. In one swift motion, he shoves Ray's car off the tracks and halts the speeding train with his immense strength. Ray's life is saved, but Hancock's intervention once again causes unintended damage. The sudden stop causes several cargo cars on the train to crash into one another, resulting in more destruction. Witnesses immediately begin criticizing Hancock again. However, Ray steps forward and defends him, telling the crowd that he is alive only because Hancock arrived in time. He shakes Hancock's hand gratefully and jokes that although his life was saved, his car is now completely ruined. Without saying much, Hancock lifts the entire car with Ray still sitting inside and flies away. Moments later, he places the car directly in front of Ray's home. Ray's young son, Aaron, rushes outside excitedly when he sees Hancock. Unlike most people in the city, Aaron absolutely admires him. Thrilled to meet his hero, Aaron convinces his father to invite Hancock inside for coffee. The evening turns into a dinner gathering. During the meal, it becomes obvious that Ray's wife, Mary, is not particularly comfortable around Hancock. His clumsy behavior and strange sense of humor make her uneasy. While chatting with Aaron, Hancock jokingly asks about the food in his usual goofy manner, but Mary quickly scolds him, saying that's not the proper way to talk to a child. Aaron then shares that a boy at school has been bullying him. Hancock casually suggests a very aggressive solution, telling Aaron to hit the bully where it hurts and drag him across the floor to scare him. Mary is shocked by the terrible advice being given to her son and clearly disapproves. Soon after, Hancock prepares to leave. But outside, Ray stops him and explains that despite everything, he believes Hancock deserves respect from the people of Los Angeles. Ray thinks Hancock could become a real hero if he just changes the way he approaches things. A few days later, Hancock returns and asks Ray for advice on how he can improve his reputation. Ray eagerly agrees to help him. He shows Hancock several videos of his past rescues. While Hancock is indeed saving lives, each rescue leaves behind massive destruction. Ray explains that this is exactly why the public dislikes him. While they are discussing this, Mary returns home and turns on the television. The news broadcast is discussing Hancock again, criticizing him for failing to attend his last 6 court hearings. The reporter insists that someone so irresponsible should be behind bars. Ray suddenly comes up with a bold plan. He tells Hancock that he should voluntarily surrender and attend court. If he accepts jail time, the city will soon realize how much they actually need him. Once crime rises without him around, people will begin to appreciate what he does. At first, Hancock hates the idea, but after thinking it over, he reluctantly agrees. When he arrives at prison, he quickly discovers that many inmates there hold grudges against him because he was the one responsible for putting them behind bars in the first place. Several prisoners attempt to attack him, but none of them stand a chance. Hancock's strength makes him practically untouchable. Even though escaping would be effortless for him, Hancock chooses to remain behind bars and follow Ray's plan. He waits patiently for the moment when the city begins to miss him. As time passes, crime rates start to climb in Los Angeles without Hancock around to stop criminals. Ray eventually visits him in prison and explains that Hancock has been officially sentenced to 8 years. However, if he behaves well, the sentence could be reduced to 4.5 years. Hearing this, Hancock loses his temper and accidentally smashes part of the prison gate. Ray quickly calms him down and reminds him that the plan will only work if he remains patient. Later, Mary and Aaron visit Hancock as well, bringing him homemade spaghetti and meatballs. Their visit lifts his spirits slightly. Eventually, Hancock grows extremely bored in prison. Then one day, while sitting inside his cell, a police officer arrives and informs him that he's needed outside. This time, Hancock is given a proper superhero costume. When he arrives at the emergency scene, he carefully controls his actions, making sure not to damage anything around him. Ray has given him some specific advice. Whenever he encounters a police officer, he should compliment them by saying, "You're doing a good job." Hancock tries it with the first officer he sees. The officer responds bluntly, saying he already knows he's doing a good job. During the rescue operation, Hancock saves a female officer who is trapped in danger. After bringing her safely back to the others, he continues repeating the phrase Ray taught him, telling multiple officers they are doing a good job. Soon after, a more serious situation unfolds. 4 armed criminals have taken a group of people hostage inside a building. Hancock carefully enters the building and takes down the criminals one by one with precise movements, avoiding any destruction this time. The hostages are rescued safely. When Hancock exits the building with the survivors, he once again tells the lead officer, "You're doing a good job." But this time, the officer smiles and replies that Hancock himself has done an excellent job. For the first time, the people of Los Angeles begin cheering for him. A large crowd gathers outside, applauding the hero who has finally changed his ways. Later that evening, Hancock joins Ray and Mary for dinner at their home. During the conversation, Ray asks a question that has been on his mind, whether Hancock might actually be an alien from another planet. Hancock admits that he doesn't really know who he is. In fact, he reveals something surprising. He has no memory of his life before about 80 years ago. He woke up in a hospital with severe injuries and no recollection of his past. Within an hour, however, his wounds mysteriously healed on their own. When the doctors searched his belongings, they only found 2 things in his pockets, a piece of chewing gum and 2 movie tickets. No friends or family ever came to visit him. The doctors later suggested that he had likely been attacked while trying to stop a mugging. Since then, Hancock has lived through decades without aging, unable to understand where he came from. Ray also shares something personal about his own family. He explains that Mary is actually Aaron's stepmother. Aaron's biological mother sadly died during childbirth. Later that night, Ray drinks too much and becomes heavily intoxicated. Hancock helps carry him back home. As Hancock prepares to leave, a strange moment occurs between him and Mary. He suddenly leans in and kisses her. To his surprise, Mary kisses him back, but only for a brief moment. Almost instantly, she reacts violently and hurls Hancock straight through a wall with tremendous force. In that shocking instant, a hidden truth is revealed. Mary possesses superhuman abilities as well. Hancock stands frozen in disbelief after realizing what just happened. Mary calmly warns him that what he has just discovered must never be revealed to anyone, especially not to Ray. Without giving him any time to question her further, she walks away, leaving him stunned. The following morning, Ray wakes up and immediately notices something strange. A large section of the wall in his house has been smashed open. Confused, he asks Mary how such a thing could have happened. Without hesitation, she casually explains that Hancock sneezed during the night and accidentally blew a hole through the wall. Ray, unaware of the truth, accepts the explanation. Not long after, Hancock shows up at the house again. By now, he's absolutely certain that Mary is hiding something. Convinced she has abilities like his, he decides to test it. While standing in the kitchen, he suddenly grabs a fork and tries to jab it into her shoulder. The fork bends and snaps instantly. Undeterred, he picks up another kitchen object and smacks her on the head, but that item shatters as well. Still trying to provoke a reaction, Hancock grabs 2 frying pans and raises them as if he's about to strike her. Before he can swing, Mary spins around and demands to know what on earth he thinks he's doing. Hancock calmly answers that he's simply trying to understand her. He explains that he now knows she's exactly like him and that he needs the truth about who she really is. Mary reluctantly agrees to talk, but only under one condition. She will answer his questions just once, and after that conversation, he must leave her family alone forever. Later that evening, Mary meets Hancock in a quiet, isolated area away from the city. The tension between them is obvious. Hancock immediately asks the question that has been bothering him. What exactly are they? Mary explains that throughout history, people have called them many things. Some believed they were gods. Others thought they were angels. In modern times, they might simply be called superheroes. Hancock assumes that means they are basically the same. But Mary quickly corrects him. According to her, they are not equal at all. She is actually stronger than he is. Hancock then wonders if there are others like them somewhere in the world. Mary shakes her head and tells him that long ago there were many beings like them, but over time they were all destroyed or disappeared. Now only 2 remain, the 2 of them. Curious, Hancock asks about their relationship. Mary hesitates for a moment before claiming that they are brother and sister. Hancock immediately rejects the idea. He points out that if they were truly siblings, the moment they shared the previous night would never have happened. The kiss between them proves she's lying. He demands to know why she's hiding the truth, but Mary refuses to say anything further. Frustrated, Hancock threatens to tell Ray everything. With that, he launches into the sky and flies back toward the city. Mary instantly follows him. By the time they reach Los Angeles, she catches up to him, and the confrontation escalates into a full-blown fight. Mary was not exaggerating about her strength. She overwhelms Hancock easily, striking him again and again with incredible force. Their battle tears through parts of the city, damaging buildings and terrifying everyone who witnesses it. People on the streets watch in shock as 2 flying superhumans clash above them. Ray also happens to see the fight and is stunned to realize that Mary is flying just like Hancock. The chaos eventually ends, and the next scene shows Hancock, Mary, and Ray standing together inside the house. Ray is completely confused and demands an explanation. He wants to know who Mary really is and what's actually going on. Mary finally tells the truth. She admits that she is the same kind of being as Hancock. Long ago, many years before Ray ever met her, she was actually Hancock's wife. She explains that no matter how far she tries to run or where she goes in the world, Hancock somehow always finds his way back to her. The connection between them is too strong to escape. Ray then asks the obvious question: if they once loved each other, why doesn't she want to live with him anymore? Mary reveals the painful reason. Whenever beings like them stay close to each other for long periods of time, their powers begin to weaken. Slowly, they become vulnerable like ordinary humans. If they remain together long enough, they can age, grow fragile, and eventually even die. After hearing this, Hancock leaves and heads straight for a liquor store, falling back into his old habit of drinking. While sitting at the bar, the bartender quietly informs him that 2 men are waiting around the corner planning to rob him. Hancock walks outside and simply smashes through the wall at the corner, grabbing both attackers and dragging them into the open. During the scuffle, one of them fires a gun and hits Hancock. After knocking out the criminals, Hancock suddenly notices something alarming. Blood is running from the bullet wound. This has never happened before. In the past, he had been shot many times without even getting scratched, but now he is clearly injured. He is rushed to the hospital, where Mary soon arrives to see him. She explains that his weakness is happening because he came too close to her again. Their proximity drains their abilities. She tells him that if he distances himself from her, his powers will return to normal. Mary then reveals more about their past. They have existed together for thousands of years, repeatedly finding each other throughout history. But every time they stay together too long, they lose their strength and become mortal. Hancock then asks about the mysterious night 80 years ago, the last thing connected to his lost memory. Mary explains that they were living in Miami at the time. One evening, they were relaxing on the beach, planning to go watch a movie later that night, which explains the 2 tickets found in his pocket. Suddenly, they were attacked by a group of people. During the fight, Hancock was struck violently in the head and severely injured. He was rushed to the hospital. Mary stayed by his side the entire time, but when he regained consciousness, he had no memory of her at all. Realizing that his memory was gone and that staying near him would only make him weaker, she made the heartbreaking decision to leave him. Shortly after she left, his injuries healed completely within an hour. While Mary is still explaining this in the hospital room, danger suddenly arrives. Parker, the criminal Hancock previously defeated and who lost a hand during that encounter, has escaped from prison with several other criminals. Driven by revenge, Parker storms the hospital with his gang. They reach Hancock's room, and Mary immediately steps in front of him to protect him. The criminals open fire, and Mary is struck by multiple bullets, leaving her critically wounded. Seeing this sends Hancock into a rage. He unleashes his fury and violently takes down the attackers one by one. Only Parker remains standing, still armed. Parker repeatedly shoots Hancock as well, leaving him severely injured. Hancock collapses to the floor. Parker walks toward him and prepares to deliver a final shot to his head. But before he can pull the trigger, Ray suddenly appears and swings an axe, chopping off Parker's remaining hand. Meanwhile, Mary's condition worsens. Her heart stops, and doctors desperately attempt to revive her. Realizing what must be done, Hancock forces himself out of the hospital building. He flies away, increasing the distance between himself and Mary so that her strength can return. A month later, Ray and his family receive a phone call. Hancock is now in New York City. During the call, he proudly reveals that he has carved Ray's company logo, All Heart Marketing, into the surface of the moon. In a mid-credits moment, Hancock is later seen confronting another criminal who is pointing a gun while demanding Hancock help him escape from the police. The criminal insults him by calling him an idiot. Instead of getting angry this time, Hancock simply smiles. And with that final moment, the story comes to an end. Imagine a superhero who can fly faster than a jet, stop trains with his bare hands, and survive explosions without a scratch. Now imagine that same superhero being the most hated man in the city. This isn't the story of a hero who saves the day and receives applause. This is the story of a man who saves lives, but somehow makes everything worse. Meet Hancock. He has unbelievable powers, strength, flight, invincibility, everything you'd expect from the world's greatest superhero. But instead of inspiring hope, he leaves behind destroyed highways, shattered buildings, and millions of dollars in damage every time he tries to help. People don't cheer when Hancock shows up. They groan. The news blames him. The city sues him, and the public sees him as nothing more than a reckless disaster waiting to happen. But here's the real mystery. Why would someone with godlike abilities live like a broken man? Hancock spends his days drunk, angry, and completely alone. He doesn't remember where he came from. He doesn't know why he has these powers, and deep down, it feels like the world has already given up on him. Until one unexpected moment changes everything. After saving an ordinary man named Ray Embry from a deadly accident, Hancock is offered something he never thought he needed: a second chance, a chance to fix his reputation, a chance to become the hero people actually believe in, and maybe a chance to discover the truth about who he really is. But as Hancock's past slowly begins to reveal itself, a shocking secret emerges, one that connects him to someone far closer than he ever imagined. And once that secret is uncovered, nothing about his life will ever be the same again. This isn't just another superhero story. It's a story about redemption, identity, and the price of being different. And by the end of it, you might start asking yourself a powerful question: what if the world's greatest hero was also its biggest mistake? Before we dive deeper into the chaos, the secrets, and the surprising twists of this story, let's take a quick look at the movie itself. The film we're talking about is Hancock, released in 2008. It stars Will Smith in one of his most unusual and unpredictable roles, a superhero who is powerful enough to save the world, but flawed enough to almost destroy it. The movie was directed by Peter Berg, and alongside Will Smith, the film features strong performances from Charlize Theron and Jason Bateman. Now, on the surface, Hancock might look like a typical superhero movie. You have superpowers, action sequences, criminals, and a city that needs saving. But this film quickly proves that it's not interested in following the usual superhero formula. Instead of a clean, polished hero like the ones we're used to seeing, Hancock introduces us to someone very different. A man with incredible abilities but absolutely no control over his life. The story takes place in modern-day Los Angeles, a city that Hancock is technically supposed to protect. But every time he tries to stop crime, things go horribly wrong. Cars crash, buildings collapse, and entire highways get destroyed. Yes, he saves people. But the damage he leaves behind is so massive that the public sees him less as a hero and more as a walking disaster. And that's where the real story begins. Everything changes when Hancock saves a struggling public relations expert named Ray Embry. Grateful for his life being saved, Ray believes Hancock isn't a bad person, he just has a terrible reputation problem. So Ray offers him something no one else ever has. A plan to rebuild his image, a chance to turn the most hated man in the city into the hero people actually respect. But what starts as a simple PR makeover slowly turns into something much bigger. Because as Hancock's life begins to change, a strange connection begins to emerge, one that links him to Ray's wife, Mary, in a way that no one could have predicted. And that's when the story stops being just about a troubled superhero and starts becoming a mystery about who Hancock really is, where his powers came from, and why his past has been hidden for so long. At first glance, Hancock looks like a typical superhero movie. Powerful abilities, explosive action, and a city constantly in danger. But the moment the story begins to unfold, it becomes clear that this film is doing something very different. This isn't just a superhero story. It's a story about a broken hero trying to find his place in the world. Most superhero films focus on characters who rise to become symbols of hope, but Hancock starts at the exact opposite point. He's already powerful, yet completely lost. And that's where the movie introduces one of its most powerful themes, redemption. Hancock is a man who has made countless mistakes. Every rescue he performs ends with chaos and destruction. The public hates him, the government doesn't trust him, and even the media portrays him as a problem rather than a solution. But deep inside, there's a question the film keeps asking. Can someone who has ruined everything still become a hero? Another major theme running through the story is loneliness. Despite having abilities that make him nearly unstoppable, Hancock is one of the most isolated characters you'll see in a superhero film. He spends most of his time alone, sitting on rooftops, drinking, and avoiding the world around him. He doesn't know where he came from. He doesn't remember his past, and he doesn't feel like he belongs anywhere. This emotional emptiness becomes the driving force behind many of his reckless actions. But as the story progresses, another theme slowly begins to surface: identity. Who is Hancock really? Is he just a destructive superhero who doesn't care about anyone, or is there something deeper behind his anger and confusion? The film balances these heavy ideas with a unique tone. At times, it's genuinely funny. Hancock's reckless behavior leads to some wild and hilarious moments. But then suddenly, the story shifts into something more emotional and mysterious. Because beneath the explosions and comedy, the film is quietly building toward a much bigger revelation, one that will completely change everything we think we know about Hancock. So while Hancock delivers the action you'd expect from a superhero movie, its real strength lies in exploring the human side of someone who seems almost godlike. And as the story continues, those themes of redemption, loneliness, and identity will collide in ways no one sees coming. As the story of Hancock moves toward its final act, everything we thought we understood about Hancock begins to change. Up until this point, Hancock believed he was simply a man with incredible powers and no memory of his past. But the truth turns out to be far more complicated and far more tragic. Ray's wife, Mary, played by Charlize Theron, finally reveals the secret she has been hiding the entire time. She and Hancock are not ordinary superhumans. They belong to a mysterious pair of immortal beings who have existed for thousands of years. Throughout history, they were created to live as partners, protecting humanity together. Wherever they went, people saw them as gods, heroes, or legends. But there is one painful rule that governs their existence. Whenever the two of them stay close to each other for too long, their powers slowly begin to disappear. The The closer they become, the more human and vulnerable they become. Centuries ago, Mary made a difficult decision. She left Hancock so that he could remain powerful and immortal. But after an incident many years later, Hancock lost his memory and forgot everything about his past, including Mary. Now that they have reunited, the same rule begins to take effect again. Hancock's strength fades, his invulnerability weakens, and for the first time in his life, he can actually be hurt. And that's exactly when danger strikes. A criminal Hancock once captured escapes and comes looking for revenge. With Hancock weakened and vulnerable, the situation suddenly becomes life-threatening. In the brutal confrontation that follows, Hancock is severely injured while trying to protect Ray and Mary. For the first time, the unstoppable superhero is on the verge of dying. But this moment leads to Hancock's most important realization. If he stays close to Mary, they will both lose their powers and eventually die. The only way for them to survive and continue protecting the world is to stay apart. So Hancock makes a heartbreaking decision. He leaves. Not because he doesn't care, but because distance is the only way to protect the people he loves. Later, we see Hancock watching over the city from afar, returning to his role as a hero, but this time with a deeper understanding of who he truly is. And in one quiet, emotional moment, Ray notices something incredible in the night sky. Hancock has carved Ray's company logo, the all-heart symbol, onto the surface of the moon. It's a silent thank you, a reminder that even someone as broken as Hancock can change. Because, in the end, Hancock didn't just become a better hero. He finally discovered what it truly means to be one. On the surface, Hancock looks like a straightforward action film. Explosions, superpowers, and a reckless hero crashing through buildings. But if you pay close attention, the movie quietly hides several clever details and symbolic moments that reveal much more about Hancock's character and his journey. One of the strongest visual themes throughout the film is isolation. Think about how Hancock is often shown in the early part of the movie. He's sitting alone on top of tall buildings, sleeping on public benches, or flying high above the city where no one can reach him. These scenes aren't just random shots. They visually represent how disconnected he feels from the world around him. Despite being incredibly powerful, Hancock is emotionally distant from everyone. Another subtle detail appears in the way Mary, played by Charlize Theron, reacts when Hancock first enters her home. Her body language immediately changes. She becomes tense, cautious, and slightly defensive. At first, it feels like she simply doesn't trust him. But later in the film, we realize that her reaction wasn't about fear, it was recognition. Mary already knows exactly who Hancock is, and she's trying desperately to hide it. The movie also uses destruction as symbolism. In the beginning, Hancock's rescues leave behind massive damage. Buildings collapse, streets crack open, and cars fly through the air. This chaos mirrors his inner state, confused, angry, and emotionally unstable. But as the story progresses and Hancock begins to change, the way he uses his powers also changes. His movements become more controlled. His rescues become cleaner. And the destruction slowly disappears. This visual shift reflects his personal growth, from a reckless outcast to someone who finally understands responsibility. Then there's the final symbolic moment of the film. At the end, Ray notices something extraordinary in the night sky. Hancock has carved the all-heart symbol onto the moon. It's not just a cool visual moment. That symbol represents the very message Ray tried to teach Hancock from the beginning, that being a hero isn't just about strength. It's about compassion, responsibility, and having heart. By placing that symbol on the moon, Hancock is sending a quiet message to the world. He may still live alone, he may still stay distant, but now he finally understands what it means to protect others. And sometimes, the most powerful heroes are the ones who choose to watch over the world from the shadows. Now here's something many viewers don't realize. The story behind Hancock is almost as interesting as the movie itself. Because the film you saw on screen went through years of development and major changes before it finally reached theaters. The original script actually had a completely different tone. It was darker, more serious, and focused heavily on the psychological side of a troubled superhero. Over time, the filmmakers decided to reshape the story by adding humor, action, and emotional moments to create a more balanced experience. And that decision helped the movie stand out. Of course, one of the biggest reasons the film works is the performance of Will Smith. At the time, Smith was already one of Hollywood's biggest stars, known for combining charisma, comedy, and action in a way very few actors could. But Hancock was a very different type of role for him. Instead of playing a confident hero, he had to portray someone flawed, reckless, and emotionally lost. The challenge was making the audience laugh at Hancock's behavior while still allowing them to feel sympathy for him. And that balance became one of the film's biggest strengths. The movie also features Charlize Theron and Jason Bateman, whose performances helped ground the story emotionally. Bateman's character Ray acts as the moral compass of the film, while Theron's character Mary introduces the mystery that changes the entire direction of the plot. Behind the scenes, the film relied heavily on advanced visual effects to bring Hancock's powers to life. The flying scenes, high-impact crashes, and massive destruction sequences required complex CGI combined with practical stunts. One particularly challenging aspect was making Hancock's strength feel believable. When he throws objects or crashes into buildings, the visual effects team had to carefully simulate real-world physics so the destruction looked powerful but still realistic. And despite the mixed reactions from critics, the movie achieved something impressive. When Hancock was released in 2008, it became a massive box office success, earning more than $600 million worldwide. That made it one of the biggest superhero films of its time, which proves something interesting about Hancock. Even though the character himself struggled to earn the world's approval, the movie about him managed to capture the attention of audiences everywhere. To truly understand what makes Hancock unique, it helps to compare it with other superhero films. Because when most people think of superheroes, they imagine characters who are almost perfect. Heroes who wear iconic suits, follow strict moral codes, and are admired by the entire world. Think about someone like Superman. Superman represents the classic superhero ideal: noble, disciplined, and respected. Whenever he appears, people feel safe. But Hancock is the complete opposite. When Hancock shows up, people panic. Instead of saving the city cleanly, he crashes through buildings, destroys highways, and leaves behind chaos wherever he goes. The film intentionally flips the traditional superhero formula by asking a bold question: what if a superhero had incredible power, but absolutely no idea how to be a hero? In that way, Hancock feels closer to modern anti-hero stories like Deadpool. Both characters break the expectations of what a superhero should look like. They're messy, unpredictable, and often cause as many problems as they solve. But there's still a deeper human side underneath the chaos. However, Hancock also stands apart from those films because it blends something unusual: comedy, action, and emotional drama all within the same story. Unlike many superhero movies that focus mainly on epic battles, Hancock spends a lot of time exploring the character's personal struggles. His loneliness, his lost memories, and his search for purpose are just as important as the action scenes. This is why Hancock occupies a strange but fascinating place in the superhero genre. It's not as dark as some anti-hero films, but it's also not as traditional as classic superhero stories. Instead, it exists somewhere in the middle. A story about a powerful man who isn't trying to save the world, he's just trying to figure out how to live in it. When Hancock finally arrived in theaters in 2008, the reaction was immediate and massive. The movie exploded at the box office. Audiences around the world were curious to see something different. A superhero who wasn't perfect, who didn't follow the usual rules, and who behaved more like a reckless anti-hero than a traditional savior. And that curiosity paid off. The film went on to earn over $600 million worldwide, making it one of the biggest blockbuster hits of that year. For many viewers, the mix of action, comedy, and emotional drama made the movie incredibly entertaining. A huge part of that success came from the performance of Will Smith. His ability to blend humor, attitude, and vulnerability helped turn Hancock into a character audiences could both laugh at and sympathize with. But while audiences enjoyed the film, critics had a very different reaction. Many critics praised the movie's unique concept and Smith's performance, but they also pointed out something that divided opinions: the story's dramatic shift in the second half. The first half of the movie focuses on Hancock's redemption and his journey to becoming a better hero. But later, when the mystery of Mary and Hancock's ancient connection is revealed, the film suddenly changes direction. For some viewers, that twist made the story more interesting and emotional. For others, it felt unexpected and slightly confusing. Because of this, the film became something critics often call divisive. Some people loved its originality, while others felt the story struggled to balance its different ideas. But here's the interesting part. Over time, Hancock has developed a stronger reputation among audiences. Many fans now appreciate the movie for taking risks and offering a superhero story that feels different from the usual formula. In fact, for some viewers, that unusual mix of humor, mystery, and emotional depth is exactly what makes Hancock memorable. Because sometimes, the most interesting superhero stories aren't about perfect heroes. They're about flawed ones trying to find their way. Review. When Hancock first hit theaters, audiences thought they knew exactly what they were getting. Another superhero blockbuster. Another larger-than-life hero flying through the sky, saving the day, defeating a villain, and walking away as the city cheers. By 2008, the formula was already familiar. Superhero movies had a rhythm people understood. The hero arrives, the villain threatens the world, the hero wins. But Hancock wasn't interested in following that formula. And that is exactly where the film's biggest problem, and its most interesting quality, begins. Because the moment the movie starts, it becomes clear that this isn't the superhero story audiences were expecting. Instead of a heroic symbol admired by the public, we meet John Hancock, a drunken, foul-mouthed, deeply unpopular man who just happens to have god-level powers. He doesn't land heroically. He crashes. He doesn't inspire hope. He inspires lawsuits. Every time Hancock saves someone, the city pays millions in damage. Buildings collapse. Cars explode. Entire intersections are destroyed. And the people he rescues aren't grateful, they're angry. The police are frustrated, the government is furious, and the public is tired of cleaning up after him. That single idea flips the entire superhero genre on its head. But here's where things get interesting. A huge part of the criticism surrounding Hancock wasn't necessarily about what the film did. It was about what audiences expected it to do. Many viewers walked into the theater anticipating a traditional comic book spectacle, something closer to the polished heroics of the big franchises dominating the genre. Instead, they got something stranger. A superhero movie where the hero is the problem. A story where the biggest conflict isn't a villain threatening the world, but a man struggling with himself. Hancock isn't fighting evil masterminds. He's fighting his own attitude, his own loneliness, and the fact that the world doesn't want him around. For some viewers, that was refreshing. For others, it felt like the movie had broken an unspoken contract. Superhero movies, after all, are usually built around clear expectations. The hero rises, the villain falls, and the audience leaves feeling triumphant. Hancock disrupts that structure almost immediately. Instead of clean heroism, it offers messy humanity. The hero drinks. He swears. He destroys half the city while trying to help. And he genuinely doesn't seem to care what anyone thinks about him. This shift in expectations created a split reaction. Some audiences appreciated the originality. They saw Hancock as a clever twist on the genre, a story exploring what a superhuman might actually look like in the real world. Others felt confused by the film's refusal to follow the usual rules. But regardless of which side viewers fell on, one thing became clear. Hancock was not trying to be the same kind of superhero movie everyone was used to. And that difference is exactly why the film continues to spark debate even years after its release. Because sometimes the most interesting superhero stories aren't about saving the world. Sometimes they're about saving the hero himself. Imagine a superhero who saves your life and then destroys half your city doing it. Your car is crushed. The street is ruined. Buildings are collapsing. And the hero who caused all that damage, he's drunk. That single idea is the foundation of Hancock, and it's one of the most interesting premises the superhero genre has ever attempted. Because instead of giving us another perfect hero, another noble protector flying across the skyline, this film asks a very different question. What if the world's most powerful superhero was also its biggest disaster? John Hancock is not the kind of hero audiences are used to. He doesn't stand proudly on rooftops protecting the innocent. He sleeps on park benches with bottles in paper bags. He wakes up only when someone drags him into a rescue situation. And when he does help, things get messy. Cars explode. Roads collapse. Entire blocks of the city end up destroyed. The people he saves should be grateful. Instead, they're furious. Because every time Hancock tries to do something heroic, the damage he causes costs millions. That flips the entire superhero fantasy upside down. Normally, superheroes are admired. They're symbols of hope. People cheer when they appear. But in Hancock, the public hates him. They don't see a savior. They see a problem. And that's what makes the premise so fascinating. The film takes the fantasy of superpowers and places it inside a world that reacts realistically. If someone with unlimited strength, flight, and invulnerability existed, but had zero discipline, cities wouldn't celebrate him. They would try to get rid of him. This is where Hancock becomes more than just a comedy gimmick. The character isn't simply a drunk superhero for laughs. He's someone completely disconnected from the world around him. He doesn't know where he came from. He doesn't remember his past. And he clearly doesn't believe anyone actually cares about him. That loneliness sits right beneath all the chaos. Every sarcastic remark, every reckless rescue, every destructive landing feels like the behavior of someone who has stopped trying to belong. And that's why the premise works so well. Because beneath the jokes and explosions, Hancock is really about a man who has forgotten how to be human. He has unlimited power, but no purpose. And that's a far more interesting starting point than the usual superhero origin story. Instead of asking how someone becomes a hero, the film asks something much deeper. What happens when someone with godlike power doesn't want to be one at all? That question is what makes Hancock stand out in a genre filled with capes and costumes. Because this time, the hero doesn't need to save the world. He needs to save himself. In most superhero movies, the story is simple. There's a villain. There's a hero. And eventually they fight. Cities are threatened. The world is at stake. And the entire plot builds toward one massive showdown. But Hancock does something very unusual. It removes the villain from the center of the story. Because the real battle in this movie isn't happening in the sky. It's happening inside the hero. From the very beginning, the film makes it clear that Hancock's biggest enemy isn't some evil mastermind plotting to destroy the world. His biggest enemy is himself. His anger. His loneliness. His bitterness toward a world that clearly doesn't appreciate him. And maybe even worse, his complete lack of purpose. Think about it. Hancock has the kind of power most superheroes dream of. He can fly, he's nearly indestructible, and nothing on Earth can really stop him. Yet he lives like a man who has given up. He drinks constantly. He avoids people. He doesn't care if the public hates him. And when he does save someone, he barely puts in the effort. That's what makes Hancock so different from traditional superhero films. Instead of building the story around a villain's plan, the film focuses on a broken man trying to figure out who he is. The turning point comes when Hancock meets Ray Embry. Ray isn't a superhero. He isn't a soldier. He isn't even particularly powerful. He's a public relations expert. But what Ray understands, something Hancock clearly doesn't, is that heroism isn't just about power. It's about responsibility, discipline, and how people see you. Ray looks at Hancock and sees potential. Not the destructive mess the public complains about, but the hero hiding underneath. So instead of preparing Hancock for a battle, Ray prepares him for something much harder. Challenge. Hancock has to learn how to behave like someone people can believe in. That means facing consequences for the destruction he's caused. It means controlling his anger. It means trying to reconnect with a world he's spent years pushing away. And that's where the film becomes less about action and more about character. The real tension in Hancock doesn't come from whether he can defeat a villain. We already know he can. The real question is whether Hancock can overcome the things that are destroying his life. Can he stop drinking? Can he accept responsibility? Can he become someone the world actually respects? That internal struggle becomes the heart of the story. It turns the movie from a typical superhero spectacle into something closer to a character study, a look at what happens when someone with extraordinary power has absolutely no idea how to live with it. Because in the end, the most dangerous enemy Hancock faces isn't standing across a battlefield. It's staring back at him in the mirror. There's a reason Hancock works as well as it does, even when the story struggles. And that reason is Will Smith. Because playing a superhero is one thing. Playing a superhero who is rude, drunk, hated by the public, and borderline unlikable for half the movie, that's a much harder job. Yet Smith manages to carry the entire film on his shoulders. From the moment Hancock appears on screen, he feels completely different from the heroic figures audiences were used to seeing. There's no dramatic entrance. No inspiring speech. No shining armor. Instead, we meet a man asleep on a park bench with a bottle in his hand. When someone wakes him up and tells him there's a crime happening across the city, he doesn't rush off like a traditional hero. He sighs. Reluctantly. Almost annoyed that he has to help. That attitude becomes the heart of Smith's performance. Hancock isn't just flawed, he's deliberately abrasive. He insults people, causes destruction, and seems completely uninterested in being liked. In many movies, that kind of character would quickly become exhausting. But Smith does something clever. He lets us see the humanity behind the arrogance. Beneath the sarcasm and reckless behavior, there's a loneliness in Hancock that quietly shapes the character. You start to realize that his anger isn't just arrogance, it's frustration. He doesn't understand who he is, where he came from, or why the world seems so disconnected from him. Smith balances those layers incredibly well. One moment he's delivering a sharp joke or sarcastic remark. The next, there's a subtle expression that hints at something deeper, confusion, regret, maybe even sadness. And that emotional contrast makes the character believable. Because Hancock isn't simply a comedic antihero. He's a man who has lost his sense of identity. His powers isolate him. His past is missing. And the world around him sees him as a problem instead of a protector. Smith's performance captures that conflict beautifully. Physically, he also sells the character's superhuman nature. The way Hancock flies, lands, and moves through action scenes feels effortless. Smith brings a natural confidence to the role that makes the character's power believable without feeling exaggerated. But the real strength of the performance isn't the action. It's the transformation. Over the course of the film, Hancock slowly begins to change. He starts confronting the consequences of his behavior. He begins to care about how people see him. And little by little, that reckless anti-hero starts to resemble something closer to a true protector. Smith handles that transition carefully. He doesn't suddenly become noble or heroic overnight. The change feels gradual, awkward, and sometimes uncomfortable, exactly the way real personal growth would feel. And that's what makes the performance so effective. Even when the film itself becomes uneven, Will Smith remains the anchor holding everything together. His charisma keeps the audience invested, his humor keeps the tone lively, and his emotional depth gives the character a sense of realism. In many ways, Hancock lives or dies on Smith's ability to make this unusual hero believable. And for the most part, he succeeds. A superhero may carry the story, but the people around him determine who he becomes. And in Hancock, two characters play that role perfectly. Ray Embry and Ray Embry. Without them, Hancock would still be the same destructive, drunken outcast we meet at the beginning of the movie. Because while Hancock has the power to lift trains and smash through buildings, he has absolutely no idea how to live among normal people. That's where Ray Embry, played by Bateman, enters the story. Ray isn't a fighter. He's not powerful. He's not even particularly successful. He's a struggling public relations consultant with one unusual quality: he believes in people. Even when no one else does. When Hancock saves Ray from an oncoming train, destroying half the city in the process, Ray doesn't see a walking disaster. He sees potential. He sees a hero trapped inside someone who simply doesn't know how to behave like one. And that belief changes everything. Ray becomes the unlikely mentor in Hancock's life. He teaches him something no one else ever tried to teach him: how to interact with the world. How to take responsibility. How to be someone people can trust. Watching Ray try to guide Hancock often feels like watching a patient teacher working with the world's most stubborn student. Hancock resists everything. He rolls his eyes. He insults people. He breaks things. But Ray never stops trying. Bateman plays this role with the kind of dry humor that makes the character instantly likable. His calm optimism balances Hancock's reckless attitude perfectly. Whenever Hancock drifts toward chaos, Ray pulls him back toward something better. That dynamic gives the film its emotional center. But Ray isn't the only person who shapes Hancock's story. Because there's also Mary. Charlize Theron's character enters the film quietly. At first, she seems skeptical of Hancock. While Ray wants to help him, Mary clearly doesn't want him anywhere near her family. And that tension immediately raises questions. Why does Mary seem so uncomfortable around him? What does she know that Ray doesn't? Theron plays Mary with a quiet intensity that hints at deeper layers beneath the surface. She's calm, composed, and observant, almost like she's carrying a secret she's not ready to reveal. And eventually, the film reveals exactly why. Without giving too much away, Mary becomes one of the most important pieces of Hancock's past. Her presence shifts the story from simple redemption into something far more personal and mysterious. Theron handles that transition well. Her performance moves from quiet resistance to emotional conflict as the truth begins to surface. Together, Bateman and Theron provide two very different influences on Hancock's life. Ray represents hope, the possibility that Hancock can change and become someone the world respects. Mary represents truth, the key to understanding who Hancock really is and where he came from. And without these two characters, Hancock's journey wouldn't exist. Because sometimes, even the most powerful person in the world needs someone to remind them who they're meant to be. There's something strange about Hancock. Ask 10 people about this movie, and you'll probably hear the same sentence. The first half was great, but the second half, and that reaction isn't random. Because Hancock almost feels like two completely different movies stitched together. Let's start with the beginning. The first half of the film is where the movie truly shines. It's fast, funny, and surprisingly fresh for a superhero story. Instead of the usual heroic introduction, we meet Hancock passed out on a park bench with a bottle in his hand. He's not admired. He's not respected. He's the most hated man in Los Angeles. And every rescue he performs just makes things worse. Buildings collapse. Cars explode. Millions of dollars in property damage follow every heroic act. The city is furious, the police are frustrated, and the public would honestly prefer if Hancock just stayed away. That setup is brilliant. The movie plays like a dark comedy about the worst superhero imaginable. Watching Hancock stumble through rescues with total indifference is genuinely entertaining. Scenes like the chaotic train rescue, the destructive police chase, or Hancock reluctantly trying to improve his behavior all capture the film's original idea perfectly. It's funny. It's sharp. And it feels like a clever satire of superhero movies themselves. Then something changes. Right around the middle of the film, Hancock starts moving in a completely different direction. The story introduces deeper mythology, hidden connections between characters, and a dramatic twist that reshapes the narrative. Suddenly, the movie isn't a dark comedy anymore. It becomes something else. The tone shifts from playful satire to serious drama. The humor that carried the first half begins to fade. Instead of focusing on Hancock's awkward attempts to become a better hero, the film dives into mysterious backstory and emotional conflict. For some viewers, this twist adds depth to the story. But for many others, it feels like the movie abandons its strongest idea. The early scenes promised a sharp comedy about a flawed superhero trying to repair his reputation. The later scenes become more focused on mythology, romance, and dramatic revelations. And that change creates a noticeable imbalance. The pacing slows down. The story becomes heavier. And the playful energy of the first half starts to disappear. It's not that the second half is completely bad, it just feels like a different movie than the one we started watching. Imagine going into a film expecting a clever superhero satire, and halfway through, it suddenly becomes a mythological drama about ancient powers and emotional destiny. That tonal shift is exactly why Hancock remains so divisive. Some viewers appreciate the ambition of trying to expand the story beyond comedy. Others wish the film had stayed focused on the idea that made the beginning so entertaining, a destructive superhero learning how to become a real hero. In the end, Hancock isn't just remembered for its premise. It's remembered for that moment halfway through the story when the movie changes direction. And whether that shift works or not depends entirely on what you wanted the film to be. One of the biggest reasons Hancock feels so unusual is because it never fully decides what kind of movie it wants to be. Is it a comedy? Is it a superhero blockbuster? Is it a romantic drama? Or is it a mythological story about immortal beings? The truth is, it tries to be all of them at once. And that's where the film's biggest tonal imbalance begins. At the start, Hancock feels like a dark comedy. The humor is built around the idea of a superhero who behaves like the last person you'd ever want saving the day. He's drunk. He's rude. And every time he tries to help someone, the city ends up paying millions of dollars in damage. Watching him stumble through rescues with complete indifference is both funny and refreshing. The movie almost feels like it's making fun of superhero films themselves. For a while, that tone works beautifully. The film is playful, sarcastic, and full of awkward situations as Hancock tries to deal with a public that absolutely hates him. His attempts to improve his image, guided by Ray Embry, led to some of the most entertaining moments in the movie. But as the story progresses, the tone begins to shift. Slowly at first. Then suddenly. The film starts introducing deeper mythology. Characters reveal hidden connections. Emotional conflicts take center stage. And what began as a dark comedy gradually transforms into something much more serious. The humor fades. The drama increases. And the movie begins exploring ideas about immortality, ancient relationships, and emotional sacrifice. That transition is where audiences start to feel the imbalance. Because the early tone promised one type of story, a sharp, comedic look at a dysfunctional superhero. But the later tone pushes the film toward romance, mythology, and heavy emotional themes. It's almost like watching two different movies sharing the same characters. One moment Hancock is making sarcastic jokes while destroying half the city. The next moment he's involved in a dramatic story about eternal connections and tragic destiny. Some viewers appreciate this ambition. They see the tonal shifts as the film trying to explore deeper themes beyond simple superhero action. Others feel the movie loses its identity halfway through. The comedy disappears too quickly. The drama arrives too suddenly. And the balance between the two never quite settles. But regardless of how you feel about the change, one thing is clear: Hancock is not a simple superhero movie. It's a film constantly shifting between humor and seriousness, between satire and mythology. And whether that tonal mix feels bold or simply uneven depends entirely on how much you're willing to go along with the ride. There's a moment while watching Hancock when you realize something strange. The movie started with a brilliant idea, but somewhere along the way, it seems to lose control of that idea. And that's where the film's writing and structure become the biggest talking point. Because on paper, Hancock has an incredibly strong concept. A superhero who is hated by the public. A man with godlike powers who drinks too much, destroys everything around him, and doesn't care what anyone thinks. That premise alone feels fresh. It opens the door for sharp satire, emotional storytelling, and a completely different type of superhero journey. And for a while, the script actually delivers on that promise. The early writing is clever and funny. Hancock's dialogue is full of sarcastic remarks and blunt honesty that instantly makes the character stand out. His interactions with Ray Embry bring out the comedic potential of the story, especially as Ray tries to teach this reckless hero how to behave like a responsible public figure. These scenes feel natural, witty, and entertaining. But as the film moves forward, the structure begins to change. New plot elements appear quickly. The story introduces deeper mythology about Hancock's past, his powers, and his connection to other characters. Instead of slowly building these ideas, the script begins stacking them on top of each other. And that's where things start to feel rushed. The film's runtime is only about 90 minutes, which means the story doesn't have much time to fully explore the complex mythology it introduces later. Important revelations appear suddenly, and the narrative begins moving rapidly toward its conclusion. As a result, some parts of the story feel underdeveloped. Questions about Hancock's origins are raised, but not fully answered. Relationships between characters shift quickly. And certain plot developments feel like they arrive before the audience has had time to process what just happened. This creates the sense that the script has more ideas than it knows how to organize. The dialogue also reflects that shift. Early in the film, the conversations feel sharp and comedic. Hancock's sarcastic remarks and Ray's optimistic responses create a lively dynamic that keeps the story moving. But later, the dialogue becomes heavier and more dramatic as the film explores emotional and mythological themes. That change in tone affects how the story flows. Some viewers appreciate the ambition behind these ideas. The script clearly tries to expand the film beyond simple superhero action and explore deeper emotional territory. Others feel the writing becomes messy and unfocused. Instead of developing the original premise further, the film introduces new concepts that pull the story in multiple directions at once. And that's why the structure of Hancock often feels uneven. The beginning is tightly focused on one strong idea, a destructive superhero trying to repair his reputation. But the later sections attempt to explore mythology, romance, and destiny, all within a very short amount of time. The result is a script filled with fascinating ideas that never quite come together as smoothly as they could have. And that's what makes Hancock such an interesting film to discuss. Because the writing shows flashes of brilliance. But it also reveals how difficult it can be to turn a great concept into a perfectly balanced story. About halfway through Hancock, the movie does something unexpected. Just when you think you understand what kind of story you're watching, the film suddenly pulls the ground out from under you. A twist appears. And from that moment on, Hancock becomes a completely different movie. Up until this point, the film feels like a clever superhero satire. The story revolves around a reckless hero learning how to repair his reputation. Hancock is trying to become a better version of himself, guided by Ray Embry, the optimistic public relations expert who believes the city's most hated hero can still change. It's funny. It's energetic. And it feels like the movie has found its rhythm. But then the twist arrives. Without giving away the details, the film reveals something major about Hancock's past and about a character who has been quietly part of the story from the beginning. Suddenly, the narrative expands beyond a simple redemption arc. What seemed like a story about public image and personal growth turns into something much larger. The twist introduces mythology. It suggests that Hancock's powers are part of something ancient, something mysterious, something connected to a history that stretches far beyond the events we've seen so far. And that revelation changes everything. For some viewers, this moment is exciting. It injects new energy into the story and raises fascinating questions about who Hancock really is. The idea that there might be deeper rules behind his powers adds a layer of mystery that the earlier scenes only hinted at. But the twist also creates new challenges for the film. Because once the story opens that door, it has to deal with everything behind it. New questions appear immediately. Where did Hancock come from? How long has he existed? What exactly connects him to the other characters? The film introduces these mysteries quickly, but it doesn't always have the time to explore them fully. With the runtime already moving toward its final act, the narrative begins racing to resolve the consequences of this revelation. That's where the twist becomes divisive. Some viewers enjoy the sudden expansion of the story. They appreciate the attempt to move beyond comedy and explore deeper emotional territory. Others feel the twist disrupts the film's original identity. What began as a sharp comedy about a dysfunctional superhero now shifts toward mythology, romance, and dramatic conflict. The humor fades, the tone becomes heavier, and the story begins focusing on emotional consequences rather than comedic chaos. And because the twist arrives relatively late in the movie, the film doesn't always have enough time to develop the ideas it introduces. Important revelations appear quickly. Relationships between characters take on new meaning almost instantly. And the final act becomes focused on resolving emotional stakes that the story only recently revealed. That's why the twist in Hancock remains one of the most debated elements of the film. It's bold. It's surprising. But it also reshapes the entire story in a way that some viewers love and others feel changes the movie they were enjoying. Because in the end, that twist doesn't just reveal something about Hancock. It changes what the movie itself is trying to be. By the time Hancock reaches its final act, many viewers are left thinking the same thing. Wait, how does all of this actually work? Because once the film begins revealing more about Hancock's powers and past, the story introduces a mythology that raises a lot of questions the movie doesn't always fully answer. At the beginning, Hancock's abilities feel simple enough. He can fly, he's incredibly strong, and almost nothing can hurt him. In a typical superhero film, that would be the extent of it. The hero has powers, the villain challenges those powers, and the story moves forward. But Hancock hints that there's more to it. Throughout the movie, pieces of Hancock's past begin to surface. We learn that he doesn't remember where he came from. His memory is fractured, leaving him with little understanding of who he truly is or why he possesses these abilities. That mystery works well at first. It adds intrigue to the character and gives the audience a reason to keep watching. If Hancock himself doesn't know the truth about his origins, then discovering that truth becomes part of the story. But when the film finally begins explaining the mythology behind his powers, the narrative becomes more complicated. Suddenly, the rules governing Hancock's abilities aren't as straightforward as they once seemed. There are connections between characters that hint at something ancient and mysterious. His powers appear to follow certain conditions that are only partially explained. And that's where the questions start piling up. How long has Hancock actually existed? Why does he have these abilities in the first place? What are the limits of his powers? The film introduces these ideas but doesn't always explore them in depth. Instead, the story continues moving forward quickly, leaving some of the mythology open to interpretation. For some viewers, that ambiguity adds to the film's mystique. Not every detail needs to be spelled out, and sometimes leaving certain elements unexplained can make a story feel larger than what's shown on screen. But for others, the lack of clear answers makes the narrative feel incomplete. Once the movie begins expanding its mythology, audiences naturally want to understand the rules of that world. When those rules remain unclear, the story can start to feel inconsistent. And because Hancock introduces these ideas relatively late in the film, there isn't much time left to develop them fully. The final act focuses on resolving the emotional conflict between characters rather than exploring the deeper mythology surrounding Hancock's existence. As a result, the film ends with a sense that there is more to this story than what we've seen. There are hints of a larger history, fragments of information about Hancock's past, and implications about how his powers work, but many of those details remain just out of reach. And that's why the mythology of Hancock continues to spark discussion long after the credits roll. Because sometimes the most intriguing part of a story isn't what it explains, it's what it leaves unanswered. Superhero movies live and die by their spectacle. If someone can fly, stop trains, smash through buildings, and survive explosions, the movie has to make that power feel real. And in Hancock, the action and visual presentation try to deliver exactly that. From the very first rescue scene, the film shows us what kind of power Hancock really has. When he takes off into the sky, it isn't graceful. It's explosive. Asphalt cracks beneath his feet, debris flies everywhere, and the impact of his strength is impossible to ignore. The movie constantly reminds us that Hancock isn't just powerful, he's destructive. Every action scene emphasizes that idea. When he stops a train, the result isn't a smooth, heroic moment. It's chaotic. Metal bends, vehicles crash, and the entire situation feels barely under control. That's part of the film's unique approach to action. Instead of presenting superhero moments as polished and elegant, Hancock shows them as messy and overwhelming. When someone with this much strength moves through a city, things break. A lot. The visual effects help bring that chaos to life. For its time, the CGI used to portray Hancock's flight, strength, and collisions with the environment was impressive. Seeing him launch into the sky or smash through structures gives the audience a clear sense of his immense power. But the visual style of the film is just as noticeable as the effects themselves. Director Peter Berg uses a camera style that feels very different from the typical superhero blockbuster. Rather than relying on steady, perfectly framed shots, the film often uses handheld camera work and rapid movement. The camera zooms, circles characters, and shakes during action sequences. Sometimes this creates a sense of immediacy, as if the viewer is standing in the middle of the chaos while Hancock tears through the city. Other times, the technique feels a bit overwhelming. Certain scenes become so visually aggressive that it can be difficult to focus on the action itself. Rapid zooms and circling close-ups occasionally distract from what's happening on screen rather than enhancing it. Still, the film clearly aims to make the action feel grounded. Instead of treating superhero abilities like clean visual spectacle, Hancock tries to show the raw impact of those powers in a real environment. Streets crack when he lands. Objects shatter when he moves. The city becomes a battlefield every time he intervenes. That approach fits the character perfectly. Hancock isn't a graceful superhero. He's a wrecking ball. And the visual presentation of the film reflects that personality. The action is loud, chaotic, and sometimes messy, just like the man at the center of the story. Even if some effects have aged over time, the film's action sequences still capture something important about this character. Because when Hancock arrives to save the day, you can be absolutely certain one thing is going to happen. Something is going to break. Hancock is a superhero movie that moves fast. Very fast. In fact, one of the most surprising things about the film is its runtime. At just over 90 minutes, it's unusually short for a blockbuster about a superpowered character flying around destroying cities. Most superhero films stretch well beyond 2 hours. But Hancock gets in, tells its story, and gets out quickly. And that choice has a big impact on how the movie feels. At first, the fast pacing works in the film's favor. The opening scenes move rapidly from one moment to the next, introducing Hancock's chaotic lifestyle and the public's frustration with him almost immediately. Within minutes, we understand everything about this character. He's powerful. He's reckless. And the world is tired of dealing with him. The story doesn't waste time getting to the point. Action scenes arrive quickly, jokes land rapidly, and the narrative moves forward without long pauses. That momentum makes the first half of the film feel energetic and entertaining. But as the movie progresses, the short runtime begins to create problems. Once the story starts introducing deeper mythology and emotional revelations, the film suddenly has a lot more to explain. New ideas appear quickly, connections between characters, secrets about Hancock's past, and changes in the direction of the narrative. And there simply isn't enough time to explore all of it properly. Because the film is moving so quickly toward its conclusion, certain developments feel rushed. Important moments arrive without much build-up, and major revelations are followed almost immediately by the next plot point. Instead of letting those ideas breathe, the movie pushes forward at full speed. Some viewers even noticed that different versions of the film seem to exist. The unrated cut released later runs slightly longer than the theatrical version, suggesting that parts of the story may have been trimmed during editing to keep the runtime short. That editing choice may explain why the film occasionally feels like it's missing pieces. Scenes transition quickly. Character relationships change rapidly. And certain plot elements appear and disappear before the audience has time to fully process them. The pacing almost feels like the film is racing against its own clock. Now, to be fair, this speed also has advantages. The movie rarely becomes boring. It keeps moving, delivering action, humor, and character moments without dragging the story out unnecessarily. But the trade-off is clear. The short runtime helps the film maintain energy, while also preventing some of its most interesting ideas from being fully developed. If Hancock had taken more time to explore its mythology, character relationships, and emotional conflicts, the story might have felt more complete. Instead, the film feels like it's constantly hurrying toward the ending. And that creates one of the most noticeable contradictions in the movie. It moves quickly enough to stay entertaining, but sometimes too quickly to feel fully satisfying. Every great superhero story usually has one thing: a villain. Someone powerful, dangerous, and compelling enough to challenge the hero. Think about the greatest superhero films. The Joker challenges Batman, Thanos challenges the Avengers, and villains often become just as memorable as the heroes themselves. But Hancock does something very unusual. It almost forgets about the villain entirely. And that creates one of the film's most noticeable weaknesses. At the beginning of the movie, this doesn't seem like a problem. The story is focused on Hancock himself, his reckless behavior, his damaged reputation, and his struggle to fit into a world that clearly doesn't appreciate him. In fact, the film almost treats the public as the antagonist. The city is angry with Hancock, the police are frustrated with him, and the government is tired of paying for the destruction he causes. The conflict feels personal and internal rather than physical. But as the story progresses, the movie eventually introduces a more traditional villain. Criminal elements appear, attempting to challenge Hancock and create a sense of danger for the final act. The problem is, they never feel like a real threat. Compared to Hancock's incredible strength and invulnerability, the antagonists in the film seem almost insignificant. They appear late in the story and don't receive enough development to make their motivations or presence truly impactful. Because of that, the final conflict lacks the intensity audiences might expect from a superhero climax. The villains don't feel powerful enough to challenge the hero, and they don't receive enough screen time to become memorable characters. This absence of a strong antagonist shifts the film's focus back toward its central characters. Ray Embry, played by Jason Bateman, becomes one of the most important supporting figures in the story. His optimism and belief in Hancock create the emotional foundation for the hero's transformation. Ray represents the possibility of redemption. Then there's Ray Embry, portrayed by Charlize Theron. Her character introduces mystery and emotional tension, eventually becoming a key part of the film's deeper mythology. Together, these supporting characters shape Hancock's journey far more than any villain does. But that also highlights the film's unusual structure. Instead of building toward a dramatic showdown between hero and villain, Hancock builds toward an emotional resolution between its main characters. The story isn't about defeating a powerful enemy. It's about understanding who Hancock really is and what kind of hero he can become. That choice makes the movie feel different from most superhero films. But it also leaves some viewers feeling like something is missing. Because when the credits roll, one question still lingers. Was the real conflict ever meant to be between hero and villain, or was it always about the hero learning how to face himself? Underneath all the explosions, the flying, and the smashed buildings, Hancock is actually a surprisingly emotional story. Because at its core, the film isn't really about a superhero saving the world. It's about a man trying to save himself. When we first meet Hancock, he's not just reckless, he's completely alone. He has no family, no friends, and no clear memory of where he came from. His past is a mystery even to him. That loneliness shapes everything about his personality. He drinks. He pushes people away. And he pretends not to care what anyone thinks about him. But that indifference is really just a defense mechanism. The truth is, Hancock doesn't know how to connect with people anymore. That's where the emotional heart of the story begins. Ray Embry becomes the first person who truly believes Hancock can change. Ray doesn't see a destructive nuisance, he sees a hero who simply needs guidance. And Ray's young son, Aaron, takes that belief even further. To Aaron, Hancock isn't a disaster. He's a hero. That innocent admiration becomes one of the most powerful emotional forces in the movie. For the first time, Hancock sees someone looking at him with genuine respect instead of frustration or fear. And slowly, that begins to change him. Hancock starts trying to become better, not because he's forced to, but because someone finally believes he can. But the film's emotional weight deepens when the story begins exploring Hancock's past. His connection to Mary reveals that his loneliness isn't just a result of his behavior. It's part of his existence. The story introduces the idea that immortality comes with a cost. Living forever means watching relationships fade, losing connections, and eventually ending up alone. That realization adds a tragic dimension to Hancock's character. His powers make him extraordinary, but they also isolate him from the world he's supposed to protect. The emotional climax of the film centers on sacrifice. True heroism in Hancock isn't about strength or invulnerability, it's about making painful choices for the sake of others. The story suggests that love, connection, and vulnerability are far more powerful than the ability to fly or lift trains. And that message gives the film its emotional payoff. Because by the end of the story, Hancock finally understands something he never grasped before. Being a hero isn't just about saving people. It's about caring enough to change for them. And that emotional journey, more than any action sequence, is what ultimately defines Hancock as a story. On the surface, Hancock looks like a superhero movie. There's a man who can fly. He can lift trains. Bullets can't hurt him. But beneath the action and comedy, the film quietly explores something deeper. Because Hancock isn't really about superpowers. It's about power itself. What happens when someone has unlimited strength but no direction? From the beginning, Hancock represents a strange contradiction. He has the ability to save anyone, stop any crime, and reshape the world around him. Yet he lives like someone completely lost. He drinks heavily. He pushes people away. And he treats his incredible abilities almost like a burden. That contrast hints at one of the film's underlying ideas: power without purpose can be destructive. Hancock has the strength to change the world, but without discipline or responsibility, that strength simply causes chaos. In a way, the character becomes a symbol of flawed authority, someone capable of doing great things, but unable to control the consequences of their actions. Some viewers even interpret the film through a broader lens. Hancock can be seen as a metaphor for powerful figures or institutions that attempt to help others, but end up causing damage along the way. The city he protects doesn't celebrate him. They resent him. Because every time he intervenes, the cost is enormous. Another theme the film explores is immortality and isolation. As the story unfolds, Hancock's existence begins to feel less like a gift and more like a curse. Living for centuries means watching the world change while remaining the same. Relationships fade. Connections disappear. Eventually, immortality becomes loneliness. The film suggests that even someone with godlike abilities cannot escape the need for human connection. That's why Hancock's emotional journey becomes so important. His story isn't about learning how to fight villains, it's about learning how to care about people again. The film also touches on the idea of redemption. Hancock begins the story as someone the world has already given up on. But through the influence of Ray and his family, he slowly realizes that being powerful isn't enough. True heroism requires responsibility. It requires sacrifice. And most importantly, it requires empathy. By the end of the story, Hancock isn't just trying to save people from danger. He's trying to become someone worthy of the power he has been given. And that transformation reveals the film's deeper message. Superheroes may have incredible abilities, but what truly defines them is how they choose to use that power. Sometimes a movie isn't judged only by what it is, but by what people thought it was going to be. And Hancock is a perfect example of that. Before the movie even reached theaters, the trailers had already painted a very specific picture. Audiences were promised a hilarious superhero comedy about a drunken, reckless hero who causes chaos everywhere he goes. The marketing lined heavily into that idea. A superhero with a terrible attitude. A public relations expert trying to fix his image. And a city completely fed up with the destruction he leaves behind. It looked like a sharp satire of the superhero genre. And honestly, the first part of the film delivers exactly that. For the first 40 minutes or so, Hancock feels like the movie the trailers promised. The humor is strong, the premise is fresh, and the concept of a destructive superhero trying to repair his reputation works really well. But then the story changes direction. Instead of continuing to build on the comedic premise, the film introduces deeper mythology, emotional drama, and a twist that reshapes the entire narrative. Suddenly, the movie isn't just about fixing Hancock's public image. It becomes a story about ancient powers, hidden connections between characters, and a much heavier emotional conflict. For some viewers, that shift was exciting. But for others, it felt like the film abandoned the idea that made it interesting in the first place. That's where the feeling of missed opportunity starts to appear. Because the premise of a reckless superhero learning how to become a responsible one had enormous potential. The early scenes show just how entertaining that concept could be. Watching Hancock struggle to behave like a proper hero creates some of the film's funniest and most memorable moments. But once the narrative moves into its mythological twist, the original idea starts to fade into the background. Instead of exploring the satire further, the story becomes something more serious and complicated. And that's why many viewers walked away thinking the same thing. The movie had an incredible concept, but it didn't fully use it. Some of the most interesting ideas introduced early in the film, like the public relations angle or the realistic consequences of superhero destruction, are only explored briefly before the story moves on to something else. It's not that the movie becomes bad. It's that it feels like it could have been even better. Because hidden inside Hancock is a brilliant idea for a superhero story that challenges the entire genre. A hero who must learn not just how to save people, but how to deserve their trust. And that idea alone had the potential to carry the entire film. Which is why, even years later, Hancock still sparks the same conversation, not just about what the movie did, but about everything it almost did. So after everything Hancock tries to do, after the comedy, the action, the twist, the mythology, and the emotional story, one big question remains. Is Hancock actually a good movie? The honest answer is yes, but also no. Because Hancock is one of those films that feels both impressive and frustrating at the same time. On one hand, the movie deserves real credit for its originality. In a genre full of polished, perfect heroes, Hancock dares to show the opposite. A superhero who drinks too much, destroys half the city while trying to help, and barely cares what people think about him. That idea alone makes the film stand out. The early part of the movie proves just how strong that concept is. The humor works, the character feels fresh, and the story explores a side of superhero life that most films never touch. What happens when the public stops cheering? What happens when the hero himself doesn't want the job? Those questions give Hancock a unique identity in the superhero genre. Then there are the performances. Will Smith carries the film with charisma and emotional depth. Jason Bateman brings warmth and humor, while Charlize Theron adds mystery and emotional tension to the story. Together, the cast keeps the movie engaging, even when the narrative starts to struggle. But that's where the other side of the argument begins. Because despite all its great ideas, Hancock often feels uneven. The film starts strong but gradually loses focus as the story becomes more complicated. The tone shifts from comedy to drama, mythology is introduced quickly, and the pacing begins to feel rushed. Instead of building on its original premise, the movie tries to juggle multiple ideas at once. And not all of them fit together smoothly. The result is a film filled with fascinating concepts that sometimes feel underdeveloped. You can see the potential for something truly great, but the final execution never quite reaches that level. And that's why reactions to Hancock have always been divided. Some viewers love its originality and bold approach to the genre. Others focus on the uneven storytelling and missed opportunities. But almost everyone agrees on one thing. Hancock is different. It's not a typical superhero movie. It's messy, ambitious, sometimes brilliant, and sometimes frustrating. But even with its flaws, it remains memorable. Because in a genre filled with safe and predictable stories, Hancock at least dared to try something new. And sometimes that alone makes a film worth watching,